I have I have worked in pro sports, nonprofit sports, and a bit of coaching as well. And my area of expertise is really in creativity and management. And that's kind of what I research.
Mm-hmm. And I am Jennifer Dafsick. I teach wellness for life, and I have been a creativity professor and a wellness professor, and I love the two connecting and joining. If I'm not teaching, you can usually find me on a trip or abroad somewhere.
We're based in Johnson City, Tennessee, which is right near the Appalachian Trail, and she's hiked like half of it or something, a third.
Not quite, but want to, very much so. Yeah. So thank you for coming to this second installation. Last month, we did talk about creativity and the creative process. And as you can remember, we thought about problems, problem identification, how we can get more into what you're working with and how you can come up with lots of creative ideas. And today we're talking about innovation. So you can kind of see that they overlap in a lot of different ways, but innovation really has to do with the action, the execution, and the implementation of your creative ideas. So we will get started with an outline for today. First, we're going to refresh because we could use it too. A whole month. And then we're going to talk about what is innovation? How is this different than creativity, or how is creativity a part of innovation? Then we're going to do an activity and talk about implementation and constraints. We're going to focus on what's personally meaningful or include some wellness, and talk about failures and successes. We will outline SMART goals for what you have come up with or created today, and introduce the idea of baby stepping, which is something that I like to utilize in my classes to move towards goals. And finally, we're going to offer a challenge for you to take with you out of this context and into your daily life, and we'll open it up for Q&A. But as always, you can write anything in the chat box. We are also watching that as well. So let's just refresh a bit about what we did a month ago. It was the creative process workshop. So I'm going to invite you to pull out your problem invitation or your challenge invitation from last time. Any problem insights that you had, maybe while doing your 15-minute activity of walking or taking a shower, seeing what creative ideas came up when you thought about that problem from your life. Okay, so just think about these if you don't have your physical list, and remember quantity over quality at this point. Just write down as many solutions to your problem as you can remember. Or maybe it's a new problem that you're working with because you already solved your last problem. And I want to take this opportunity just to ask you what some of the most creative or curious insights that you had about your wellness, your second to lowest wellness dimension from last time. And I want you to go ahead and write any insights that you had into the chat box, maybe one or two. We just want to see what came up when you were working with creativity and the ideas. To start with, did anything come up for you when you were working with your list?
Yeah, I think that trying to think about scaling it back into not just how am I going to achieve this solution, but also what the process is going to look like for that solution. Because I generally try to get too ambitious. And so I was like, let's slow it back. Let's bring it to something and it's okay if it's small.
Yeah.
That's always a big thing for me.
Yeah, it definitely is okay if it's small. Because that's sometimes the best way to move forward with something. All right. really like to use the time when I'm running to think things through. I came up with my best ideas and break things down during that time. Awesome. Yes, we know through research, wellness studies, that moving actually helps us think. It's connecting the whole body and allowing us to dig deeper into what's really going on with the situation.
Oh yeah, adaptability. That is, and we're going to talk about that today too, is that how the surroundings can change sometimes quickly, especially in sports right now. There's a whole story about that in my career from a long time ago, but yeah, that idea of being flexible to it, through it, is also really important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I get some good insight.
Change is the only constant. So how can we roll with it? Yeah, love it. All right, great. Well, if you have other insights and want to share, here's one. I had something that just lined up to help with my problem. Yes. Awesome. Let's celebrate that. I love that. Streaming on Twitch, right? Coming up with creative ways in which to make your lives better. That's always great. Hiding phone. Bring joy back. Yes, because it can get kind of depressing sometimes.
Or just a lot.
Or overwhelming. Yeah, both things.
I've done that a lot. I have a particular email address that can get overwhelming, and I now only check it once a day. So I feel that. Awesome. These are great. Keep writing them down for yourself, and also share any insights. And we are going to kind of pick up where we left off. So what happens now? I have all of these creative ideas. Right. And I think that's what's really interesting about innovation is some people are in the boat of, I don't really have a lot of ideas. I'm not very creative. But then there's this whole set of people who have amazing ideas. I know you have amazing ideas. I know one of my other colleagues, Amy, always is coming up with these amazing ideas. But then that's just the beginning. Innovation is a process where you start with creativity and then you go into, okay, well, if I have all these amazing ideas, which one do I choose? Because we can't do all of our ideas all the time. I tried to do Kung Fu, swimming, soccer, and training for triathlon at the same time, and then promptly injured myself and have not done any of them for 3 weeks. So kind of a great example, right? We have to kind of choose wisely as we're thinking about those creative ideas. And we're going to talk through that innovation adoption and then into the implementation stage. And kind of what are the things that influence the implementation stage and what do we need to keep in mind and how do we get both into the implementation stage, but then how also do we push through and help ourselves achieve what we're hoping to achieve at the end of the implementation stage. So we talked about the creative, we talked about that first part, we have creative ideas. Now let's talk about idea adoption. So taking that list that you have, right? I'm sure that you framed it from last month. It was so impactful. But, you know, whether you have that list right now or you can sort of recall some of it, I want you to think about looking at that list is what are the easiest, the most impactful and meaningful solutions, either your problem or idea that you have, even if it's related more to a question, and look at those and choose top 3. And then as you're thinking about that top 3 is then I want you to combine that top 3 into one idea. So that's where kind of go back into the creativity is you want to take elements of these top 3 potential solutions or ideas and kind of bring them together into one idea. I will tell you that takes some mental capacity. And depending on how you're feeling, we're in our last week of the semester. I will tell you my creative capacity is not at its highest. So if you're at that stage, totally fine. You can just choose one of your ideas because we're going to use that one idea to move forward. So take like a minute and a half to narrow down your ideas into your top 3. And as you're doing that, think about those things, right? Like think about capacity? Is it what's going to be your easiest, but also what's going to be your most impactful, what's going to be your most meaningful, related to you, related to your organization, as you think about narrowing those top three, and then combine that into one idea. So take a minute and we'll circle back.
And as you're thinking about narrowing your idea down, if you've already come up with solutions for one problem, you can think of any problem that you're having in your life to be working with this on. So you can think about it as what you identified last time, or just think about a problem that came across your desk this morning, and thinking about coming up with the solutions and then narrowing down those solutions. So it doesn't have to be specifically your problem from last time, but if you have it, that would be great.
Just take a little bit more time, just like 10, 15 more seconds, right? It's always good to have that time constraint we talked about last month. So thinking about, you've chosen an idea, you've chosen a solution, whatever that looks like to you. And now is the implementation stage. It's probably the most exciting part, right? Because you get to enact change, but it's also potentially the most difficult part. And we're going to kind of talk through is like, how do we implement these creative ideas? And so the first thing I want to talk about is something that's actually come out of my research. So I want to talk about constraints. And I did some research in minor league baseball, and we looked at people's innovative behavior. So they're, engaging in the creative process, they're coming up with these ideas, and then they were really struggling on how that impacted their organizational goals, right? Because these ideas are new and useful to whatever the unit of measure is. And for them, it was their organization. And one of the things that we sort of came up with was this idea of an inverted U. And so it's sort of the hump of constraints. And thinking about having no constraints, right? Sort of a dream. Well, I can do whatever I want. I have as much money and time and, intellect as I need. That actually, that will also potentially decrease your innovation, because you won't have the motivation to push through those difficult times, or adopt an idea that is the most meaningful or the most impactful. But then in the same regard, and I think probably many of you, depending on the size of your organization or the time that you have as an individual, thinking about wellness and creativity, is you're on the other side. You're on the, I have a ton of constraints. And that's really, hindering me in my ability to come up or to implement these creative ideas. So, when you think about your constraints, I want you to take, again, this is a kind of a writing exercise, a thought exercise, is when you're thinking about that idea that you have, that solution that you have right now, is I want you to take 1 minute and I want you to think about the constraints that are around it. And really think broadly about what that means in terms of constraints. So it's especially if you're looking at an organizational, which is kind of my area, is like looking at an organizational idea, is thinking about all the different stakeholders that might be in play. And if you're looking at a personal idea, right, and thinking about wellness, is what are the different environmental things and individual things that might be influenced. And as you're listing out those constraints, is I want you to, right beside that particular constraint, is I want you to think how it could be helpful. So when we think about creative ideas, right, we had that minute and a half where you had to like come up with as many ideas as you could. That's a helpful constraint. Now, what if I gave you 10 seconds to do it, right? Okay, well, maybe we need a little bit more time than that. So as you list out your constraints, I want you to write down a way that potentially it could be helpful or a way that you could potentially improve upon that constraint, whether removing it or adjusting the idea to that constraint. So, you don't need to list every constraint, but take a minute to list out a few constraints and then right beside those, and we'll kind of discuss that. So take that minute. All right, so if you want to put in the chat one constraint that you have related to your idea, and then also, potentially some ideas for how it could be helpful or how you could remove it or how you could adjust your idea. So throw those in the chat, what you've written down. You have to do all of them, you just do one.
One of the ones that I wrote down is time. I feel very time constricted right now. But I was thinking about it too, just in like terms of getting my work done, it does make me focus really well because I may only have an hour to get any work done, and the amount that I'm able to get done in that shorter amount of time has really surprised me, and I'm very impressed by myself. So I'm like really sitting with that sweet spot. Where is the sweet spot between like having too much time or not enough time to get
then you
what
just
I
go
need
on
done.
Twitter. Yeah. When I have too much time, that's the first thing I do. Yeah, Kim, I love that. Motivation, helpful when I know something is meaningful, I work harder. Yeah, can you actually share like how do you frame that in terms of like when you know it's going to be meaningful, or do you create your own meaning with it?
A little bit of both. I do not know, but I know there are many times there are tasks in my job that I do not want to do or don't feel like doing. And like motivating myself to do it is like very hard. I'm sure we all feel that way. And so trying to either find meaning in it, or I often find like the easier tasks I'm more motivated to do because I like want to do them, or like I'm more motivated to do them. I don't really know. It's a very hard thing to motivate yourself to do something you don't want to do. But I guess looking at the long way out and knowing that like it has to be done to like move the program forward and in some ways, but that's definitely something that I struggle with. Also, when it's nice outside, that really controls my motivation because I want to go outside.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I can see other people too are talking about time, anxiety as well, time zones. That's a really interesting one. So you're dealing with a lot of different people in different time zones. I feel that I have coworkers in Australia that can really create some challenges and constraints. And it's interesting that motivation, time, anxiety, money, right? Our organizations or even ourselves, it's not, we don't have endless amounts of money. I worked in women's pro soccer and we never had any money ever. And so how do we come up with ways to engage with our fans? For us, that's what we were thinking about a lot, is how do we engage with our fans without having access to the resources that pro sports teams had? And so, yeah, that it definitely was an interesting constraint to think about. And then how do we frame, right? Because time is a finite resource. And we could get really philosophical on that, but I'm reading a really good book about that right now. But it's also something that can be reframed in terms of, right, when we thought about those creative ideas, we only had a minute and a half, which can be really motivating to move us forward. But we need to figure out ways in which we can allow time for the things that are really meaningful. And what else do we need to remove to help alleviate that constraint if it's really, really narrow? Oh my gosh, yes. Trying to find times at work, people. That is really difficult. And I, especially Mary, I feel like with yours in particular, they're like those creativity exercises could potentially be really helpful in that, in like framing, okay, how this is something we can't change, right? We literally cannot change the fact that everybody's in different time zones. So we can't remove that constraint, but then how can we reframe it and come up with other ways in addressing that related to, working with each other, breaking ideas down. We're actually going to talk about that today. Oh, I feel like that could transition, but I feel like that is the, breaking down issues that feel overwhelming into smaller bite-sized pieces. That's what we're going to talk about with ideas and implementation of ideas. We both do this in our classes. I have something with my students where every week we do a small change, and so often they're like, I'm going to meet with every single student for an hour. And I'm like, that's not small, that's massive. And so I'm like, how about just one student? And so getting us down to those tiny little steps, we're going to address later. And so constraints are hard, and environmental constraints are even harder because you can't change those, and you can't necessarily control them. And that's where going back into the innovation and thinking about, as we're going to talk about sort of the next activities we're going to talk about, is then how do we work with those? Because creativity and innovation, that's really what it can do, is it allows us to work with those constraints, rather than sort of just getting really depressed about our constraints, which, we totally understand because we've both worked in pretty difficult situations before. So let's talk through sort of what do we do next if we're struggling with those constraints.
So Kim, I love how you have already talked about motivation, because that is one of the ways that we can start to work with these constraints. And I want you to look at your solution and think about what would it actually take to bring it into the world. And why? Why is this important? Why is this meaningful? I'm not sure if you've seen the TED Talk on Simon Sinek, Start with Why, but we know from research that when we boil it down to the reason it exists to begin with, it's going to be stronger. You can communicate your idea, your motivation, the possibility to others even easier. So write down your why. Why is your solution that you've identified helpful, meaningful, powerful? This, you can even, if it's an ongoing problem that you're working with, you can write this on a Post-it note and put it in a place where you can see it. Being reminded of our why, of our meaning attached to it, is very, very powerful. And the more we can see it, the better. It will kind of reroute our commitment to making the change, even when it gets, or especially when it gets really difficult. Another way you can think about bringing something into the world, you can start to identify your fears. So thinking about your fears before they come up is also a really powerful way to allow your body to kind of get used to the change before it actually happens. So for example, if I am trying to increase my environmental wellness. I love that Sarah talked about what she does already to move to another location, and learning that that is what you prefer, right? So are there any fears around that though? Are you more productive? Where are you more productive? I sometimes get scared when I go out to coffee shops in our local community, because we have a lot of chatters, and I love this sense of community and want to engage with it, but it can be really difficult to go to a coffee shop and have conversations when I know that I need to be working. So that's a fear.
If any of y'all are based in the South, just be prepared. Or maybe you understand already. People love to chat here.
Yeah, and it's wonderful.
And
it's just thinking about it as a constraint. So I'm not sure I would utilize that if my solution was to set aside more productive work time, that I would have to be really aware of what environment I chose for that. So writing down all of your fears, it can be intrinsic fears. I'm not good enough. I'm not prepared enough. It can be extrinsic or outside, external issues or fears. Just like really being real with them, being authentic. Embracing that these are what I'm working with right now. There is nothing wrong with them. And it can be actually kind of liberating to name them, to have them outside of yourself in some way. So these are two of the elements of learning what would it take to really start to move towards implementing your solution. And it brings us to the possibility of failure. And failure is hard, right? It is a difficult thing to experience. The emotions that we feel when we fail, a lot of times it's not talked about very much in our social circles as something that should be embraced and kind of celebrated. Also, it can be difficult in organizations. And I want to encourage you to kind of reframe failure and think about it as more of a learning opportunity. And I'm sure you've heard about this before. But this idea that we can celebrate failure and that it is the most powerful learning tool we have. So if you have that reason why you are so committed to making this change or implementing a solution, then you can fail multiple times. And each time you probably will learn something new from the failure itself. And once we do that, we can iterate. So an iteration just means we change the plan and we go for something new, or we pivot our idea. This is not working the way we're going. All right, we're going to take a sharp left and end up at a different solution. So failing is just one step of the process, and it has the potential to derail. But once you have kind of identified those fears, identified your reason why, it can be seen as more of a step. And maybe not to spend the money on the same thing in the next time around, right? Which is all incredibly helpful for our continued evolution as we grow and change as humans. So failure is just kind of part of the process. Success is when we can say, yes, we have completed, we have implemented our idea through completion, and we can celebrate that as well, right? So success is a numbers game. You're going to have to fail probably several times before you make it to success. As we know, J.K. Rowling failed 12 times to get Harry Potter published. So she had 12 rejection letters, and then finally one picked it up. So thinking about it as an example in like strength training, as we know, like working out just makes our muscles stronger, but it hurts. Failure can do kind of the same thing, but we can set ourselves up for success, writing down your reason why, thinking about fears and obstacles before they happen. And also we can make things really converged. Like there's this point where we can have a really, really clear idea of what we're trying to do. And the method we're going to use today for that is called creating a SMART goal. And you may have done this before, but what we're going to do is use the solution that you have identified and turn it into a SMART goal itself. So SMART is an acronym. It means specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. So I'm going to ask a few questions for each of these items. And as I'm speaking, I want you just to go ahead and write down notes that you have about your solution. Okay, so we're going to start with number 1, specific. So what needs to be accomplished? If you can, write out those steps to be taken to achieve your solution. Next to these steps, you can start to think about who is responsible or in charge of doing these steps. Is it you? Is it someone else? These can be so helpful to identify before you begin implementing. That way you know that you have all of the steps recognized, that you can go in some sort of order, or there's a method to the madness, right? And you also know who you need to talk to about this idea and who you need to ask for help. All right, number 2 is measurable. Here is where you're going to quantify your goal or think of numbers or a percent. So you can think of this by how many times, or at the end of a program, how many people what percentage of participants you want to have interacted with the content, you know, whether that's 80% or 100%. So just thinking about if you can make it measurable. So at the end of implementation, you can go back and say, I achieved it, I did it. I measured it and it worked out. All right, number 3 is achievable. So is your solution reasonably accomplished? And this one's a hard one because we want to say, yes, that idea where I'm going to create 4 social media posts in an hour, that's it. That's the ticket. But is it reasonable? Do you have the resources? Do you have the attention span? Do you have, that spaciousness within yourself to do that? And if you don't, that's okay. This is like kind of the opportunity to scale back, what Natalie was talking about, right? Make it smaller. All right, number 4, realistic. You're going to use your why and think of the whole big picture. Is this useful, applicable in your organization, in your life as a whole? So thinking about this 30,000 foot perspective, looking down on the situation. And then finally, is it time bound? So what is your time frame? How long do you think that it's going to take from start to finish? And when do you want to begin? And when do you want to end?
This is why I've never learned another language. It's because I never put in a time bound. I'm like, oh, I'll learn it eventually. I'm almost 40. We're still working on it. So that's important to put the time bound in there.
Yes. It can be really helpful. So utilize all of these new questions and rewrite your solution idea with these factors included. And oftentimes you want to narrow it down to where it's just one sentence. And it can be difficult to do this. So I want to introduce a method for making this smaller or making this more easily accessible. And I call it baby stepping. And it's just one question that doesn't cover all of the SMART goal attributes, but it covers most of them in order to get started. So the question itself is, what is one 5-minute activity you can complete today or this afternoon to move towards implementing your idea? So this is a way to bring all of that information to think about the first step in the process. What is the first thing that you've identified that would help you move towards the implementation process? And I want to invite you to write it in the chat box when you have answered this question. So, or you have found your baby step. I like to say a 5-minute activity because we have a real sense of what 5 minutes is, but sometimes I do use 15-minute activity. But when you get over that amount of time, we think that we can accomplish a lot more usually in 30 minutes than we can reasonably accomplish. So that's why it's helpful to make it small and really think about that first SMART goal or specific, right? It makes you define it really hardcore.
Something, put it in the chat.
Yeah. So whenever, if ever you're ready, we can give 2 minutes and really think about using the SMART acronym and also the baby stepping idea. And whenever you're ready to share, you can go ahead and put it in the chat box. So we'll give you 2 minutes to do that.
Write mine down.
In these last 30 seconds or so, if you have an idea, you can write it in the chat box. This is also an accountability measure. So having to say it out loud sometimes also really solidifies our commitment to it, or also that we know that it's specific enough if we're able to communicate it to someone else. So thanks for stepping up, Kim, and writing yours. Brainstorm 5 new topics of our VISTA table talk series. I love that.
Well, I think also it normalizes failure too, because if you admit to people like, hey, I want to do this thing, and then you don't do it, or it doesn't work out the way you wanted it to, then they also can come and obviously, hopefully you're building a creative work environment where people are supportive of that, but it's like, oh, okay, like, hey, maybe tomorrow, right? Or how can I support you in making that achievable the next day? That can be really helpful too, in getting that, normalizing that within the workplace or within, your personal life as well. So I should say mine out loud.
Yeah.
We have a new computer system for entering our tenure and promotion stuff into this. It's terrible system, but it's due in the fall. And rather than wait until the last minute, I'm going to spend just 5 minutes. Like, I'm going to time myself because it's, Kim, it's very similar. It's those things I know I need to do. I'm going to spend 5 minutes every day this week doing little bits of it. Just 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So it'll help me achieve a goal that will make my life easier in the fall. Oh, declutter.
Yes.
Put a time. Yeah, that time limit's really helpful for decluttering.
Yeah.
Because
because you can kind of get lost in it, right? Once you start one drawer, it's like, oh, I need to go to the second drawer. But you can kind of keep your motivation going that way too. If you limit yourself to 5 minutes, and then the next day maybe you can do another 5 minutes, and it helps keep the energy recycling itself. Yeah, I love it. Yes, I do too. I will spend hours doing it and truly burn out. And then it may be months before I feel able to go through, a whole closet or something. Yeah.
And
so
great. That implementation side of creativity and innovation, burnout is such a thing. So that is why we really encourage baby stepping, because you can get, even, especially if you're really excited, even if you're not excited, sometimes you can still end up getting burnout, but if you're really excited, you're going to jump right into something, which is great, but you may end up burning yourself out and then not being able to get it to the finish line. And so it's kind of making yourself slow down a little bit, using that baby stepping can also help with that too. I need to do that. I like that idea. I'm taking it. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah. It's like, what tasks can you complete to make your other tasks easier for yourself? Like this idea of rewriting notes to make them understandable and easier to prioritize tasks. I love it. That's a great idea. Awesome.
It's also a great part about innovation is the more you share, the more likely you are to get cool ideas as well, from other people too, that may help be a new solution to a problem that you have as well.
Definitely.
So I keep thinking about it as you share, because we're headed to our challenge is, okay, so some of y'all have written yours down. Maybe you've written it down without you want to share the chat yet. That's okay. You want to share it with a trusted friend. We're not trusted friends yet, but maybe one day. Is I want you to complete that baby step today. Like, I want a DM in my Twitter or in your Instagram being like, I did it today. And then I want you to do it again tomorrow. And you can, find a friend that will help you, like, hey, I'm going to do it again tomorrow. And they're going to check in. Hey, have you done it today? And just continually and thinking, I mean, hopefully our voices aren't so annoying. Maybe we'll be in the back of your head tomorrow being like, oh, they said today's challenge is also tomorrow's challenge, which is also Friday's challenge, which if it's work related, then again on Monday, because we don't work on the weekends unless we have to. And moving toward that solution being integrated slowly but surely with those small baby steps. And then also, I think, someone brought up kind of at the beginning is that also helps you adjust, right? So I may need to, do my meeting notes, and the first time I implement it, right, I'm moving toward that, integrating that idea into my life, is I may handwrite it. And then, what if I'm having a meeting while I'm doing like a walk and talk? Like, I don't have a pen with me. Okay, well, now maybe I need to come up with a new way to integrate that into my life. And so adjusting that as the situation arises is a really helpful way to kind of build that skill. So we have 10 minutes, and we wanted to leave as much time as we could to have questions. And so I want to kind of leave this up, if you don't mind, living this up. This is sort of the whole process. And again, going through it, it is both linear, but it's also never ending. And so I thought of this maybe a half an hour, 45 minutes ago. I was like, it's a Ferris wheel, not a marathon. So there is no end, but there is a line that goes. So engaging it with it engaging with it again, can really make this a mindful practice and something that will help potentially across both your career, and also your personal life and your wellness. So feel free to throw questions in the chat. And I guess actually probably should move to the next slide, because then also if you have questions, you want to reach out to us, you can reach out.
Yeah, if you need like a cheerleader, right? We know how difficult it is to implement change, even when it's small changes, but they become big changes, the snowball effect, right? So
Yeah.
you need a cheerleader.
I love writing a good exclamation point.
Yeah, we are always up to the task. So yeah, do you have any questions about creativity, innovation, wellness, how to use it in sport, how to use it in life? Is there anything that pops for you that we can speak to more in this ending time? And you can unmute yourself if that's easier, or you can put it in the chat box.
Yeah. Yes. Well, one, creativity can actually impact your neural networks. Your neural networks. That's the phrase. So the more you engage in creative process, so identifying problems and searching for information and then idea generating, the more you can actually impact the neural activity of your brain. And so that can actually increase your capacity. But then also I like to bring in other people. So I'm actually not a big abstract thinker myself, even though this is my area like of research. And so I bring in really creative experts, like Jennifer here, but also I have a couple of other folks. And I think that can also be really encouraging, because it's, people who engage in the creative process, can help you kind of like think differently as well, and inspire things in you that maybe somebody who's thinks very similarly than you may not. And so I love when I'm talking to people. My coworker in particular, Amy, is very different than me, and we think very differently. And I love that because I think she brings in that, that sort of big picture creativity that I don't have as much. Yeah.
And I want to add too, for those who are big abstract thinkers, I would identify as that. And it can be so overwhelming to only have a team built of abstract thinkers, because it gets really big, really fast. And you want doers or people who can implement, that's more their skill set, in the room as well, because then you can have tangible, specific goals, right? Thinking SMART goals, to be able to actually enact your cool change in the world, or, your creativity. So there's room for everyone at the table in the creative process. And when we play to our strengths, everyone wins. So we can all work on becoming better at creative thinking and expansion, because our brains are neuroplastic. And, for big creativity enthusiasts, I can get better at narrowing, committing to change, to practicing that baby step over and over again. So yeah, this is a great question, because that's how you build great teams.
Yes. You should speak to this one. I know
Yeah,
this is-
I have a hard time with follow through. I can come up with a ton of ideas, but I feel like I have a hard time accomplishing them. Oh man, me too. This is the struggle. Yeah, so I'm wondering, Sarah, if you have a specific question around it. I can also just speak to kind of tricks and tips that I use. Awesome, Melissa's jumping on this wagon too. Okay, so I will write them all down because what happens a lot of times is they get stuck in my mind and then everything just sort of blooms and goes all over the place. So I write them down in order to start feeling out, and I do use feeling as the word. What is the most meaningful, the most impactful, the most giving or supporting of others? Because, or of myself, right? Asking these kinds of questions of priority or value helps me because I'm like, oh, this is such a cool idea, but it's not meaningful. It's not really in the moment impactful. So I carry a journal with me and I write down all of the ideas. That way I don't lose them, but I also then will start to edit for practicality, for what's really useful in my life right now. And this helps me keep my creativeness, the creative thinking skill of diverging, right? Because I'm always writing them down, but I also spend the most time focusing on what is the most meaningful, how can I implement the priorities first before a whole other round comes in of ideas.
Yeah, I want to see this on like an organizational level. My team does this. We do this together. So we want to serve our students. We want to grow as faculty. Is we actually sat down and had a meeting and came up with, we had all individually come up with ideas, kind of gone through the creative process on our own. And then we came together and we wrote down everything that we wanted to achieve, which was literally impossible to like achieve all these things. And we have a really strong vision. We just call it more than a major. And it's this sort of ethos we have. And it's a vision that we have for our program. And so we're always looking back at that while we were going through that big list and prioritizing, we were using that vision to prioritize what we were hoping to achieve. And then we assigned it to people. So when you're doing it for yourself, you're like, okay, well, it's obviously assigned to me, but it may not be. Maybe you can actually say, I mean, I have more than once said, I don't have time to do this. I think it's really cool. And I've just thrown it out to people and been like, you can take it. Like, I don't even need credit, like, please. And so we assigned it to people and then we gave ourselves a deadline. Can we, and let's be realistic with each other, can I actually achieve this and this for the team in the next year? And obviously having grace with that. Like, fortunately, we don't really have any shamers in my program. And so we are going to be supportive of each other. And how can I support you in achieving the things that this group has assigned to you? But that's been really helpful, is like, when you're talking about a group setting, is and being honest about, hey, I really think that we need to do A, B, and C. I can only achieve A. Would anybody be willing to take B? And then you can have a discussion like, no, nobody can really do B. Okay, well then maybe it actually isn't that much of a priority as I think it is. Or, oh no, B is actually a really big passion of my coworker. Like, they're more than happy to take it on. So I just found, like, from a group setting that has been a really powerful way. And then again, that participative safety is really huge with that, is people being okay with, saying, hey, I really can't do that. Or, no, I want to do it, but we're going to have to push it for another 2 years, which is my least favorite thing to do, but I have to do it. I have great goals for my like year 50. And consistent motivation.
Yeah, so I guess I'll speak to this from a wellness perspective. How to maintain consistent motivation. So I like to look at the wellness wheel that we talked about last session, and kind of see my life as a whole and knowing that it is my opportunity to, create better quality of life for myself. So that's kind of my threshold. That is the threshold actually in wellness too. And so when we're talking about quality of life, that is how I maintain motivation. And sometimes my quality of life to achieve a goal would be to rest or to sleep. It is a part of it that we often don't talk about because we're like achieve, but sometimes it's not about doing anything else. It's about doing what's going to increase your quality of life in order for you to have that spaciousness, that capacity to take on further challenges down the road. So it's very in the moment. It's very, very in the moment. I know we're at 2 p.m. So there is a survey for feedback just listed in the chat. If everyone could fill that out, that's always so helpful for us to know. And we'll stay on and answer questions. But thank you all for participating today and in the first session if you have to go. But yeah, so
speaking of time as a constraint, we know you probably have other things you need to go to, but we can stay on and keep chatting as people.
Yeah. So going back to this idea, that's how to maintain motivation, because as we know, life goes through ebbs and flows, right? There is this like period of peak performance flow. In creativity, it's called flow. And then there are times when we just don't have very much energy. We feel very worn out, or there's just not a lot of motivation. And creating daily routines that kind of balance or that find the middle of that, because we know we have to keep working when we don't have the motivation. And we also probably should limit ourselves when we have epic motivation, because we'll start to burn out, like Natalie said. So it's finding your baseline. That's what we call it in wellness, is finding that baseline and really being true to it. So that way you can have these waves as you go along, but you have already kind of set the foundation for success, no matter what part of the wave you're on. Yeah. There was another part of this one.
Oh, she was just saying about it's tough. And
Gosh,
grace
so
and time for yourself.
Yeah. Patience. It can
process.
Also help if you're just trying on something. It's a mental trick, because our ego really likes to attach to things and make them part of our identity right away. But if we can take a step back and just be like, hey, I'm going to try on this like new role, this new
that's where
idea I have.
The iteration and pivoting. That's where that really comes into play, especially with innovation, is where God, CNN Plus, great example of that. Right? Like cool innovation for CNN is utter failure. They may have considered doing like smaller steps and seeing and trying it out a little bit more, right? Trying it on, trying it out, and figuring out what were the next steps in making whatever that success looks like, and not even necessarily attaching to the success has to happen. That no, okay, we didn't achieve our goal, and then how do we iterate and pivot from there? Is really people have really end up with really unique innovations and really unique ideas. Gosh, you see it all the time. And there's a recent one about, I think it was Savannah Bananas, where fans actually choose the pitch. And it's just like a really cute, fun, like innovation idea. And they're just going to try it. And I know that then if it doesn't go well, they're just not going to do it anymore, or they're going to keep doing it if it goes well. And so, COVID did do that. So cool. Any other questions? Or this is really, really enjoyed talking to all of you.
Thank you so much, Natalie and Jennifer. We really appreciate both sessions. They were really wonderful and amazing. And we recorded this one, so we'll send it out to anybody if they want to listen in or couldn't come today. And thank you. I'll stick around for a couple minutes in case someone wants to come off mute. But thank you all so much for coming, and thank you both for your amazing insight on creativity and wellness and how those things intersect.
Awesome. Thank y'all.
Really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I like all the things.
We're glad to be helpful and engaging. We love this stuff. So if there's more questions, yeah, we're very into it. So thank y'all so much for being engaged. And
Quick question. I know you said you were reading a book about time, and I wanted to get the name of that.
Yeah, it's called 4,000 Weeks. And I think it's like a time management for mortals. Yeah, I think it's 4,000 Weeks. And it gets a little philosophy. I'm like in the middle of it though. So like, I can't even give you a full, but I just thought it was really interesting, a really interesting way to look at it. So I don't agree with everything, but I really enjoy reading different perspectives, I think.
yeah, the author is Oliver Berkman.
Oh yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So 4,000 weeks is the average lifespan for a human. So that's kind of where it comes from, to give you insight.
Wow. No, once you said it was like philosophical and like time is like kind of relative, and I was like, ooh, I really want to get into that.
Awesome. Yeah.
Kim's already got the Amazon up. Nice.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, it's just especially I'm very achievement oriented, and very like productive. Like I'm definitely raised in like a Protestant work ethic sort of environment, and feel like I'm recovering from that. And so that was a really interesting book to read based off of sort of that cultural bias I think that I have growing up.
Yeah, I also feel we're all trying to like unlearn like that productivity is our worth because of like capitalism, which is like whole everything. So yeah, definitely resonate with you on that level.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Deconstruction of the shoulds of life to go towards, what's really meaningful and really going to up your quality. I love it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you both.
Yeah. Thank you. Great questions.
I guess we can stop sharing.
Oh yeah, we can do that.
So that people would have gotten our information by then.
Is there anything else before we jump off?
Before we go implement our own small changes.
I know. I got to get on my 5 minutes here.
I'm in our next email. I'm definitely going to ask how it went.
Please do. Okay. Well, Danielle, Max, Twyla, Chloe, or Sam, and Isabel, and Leah, any other questions? Great. Well, again, thank you so much. Great to see you again.
Yeah.
Good luck on this last week of finals. You said that was this, right? Then is it summer break?
Yeah, we leave next week.
Yes.
Where are you going? Somewhere fun?
Croatia.
Yeah, Croatia.
Oh, I've heard that's very beautiful. I've never been, but have heard good things.
Yeah, we've also heard good things, so I think it'll be great. Yeah, it's exciting. Yeah,
but we have to get through this week first.
Yes, there's just a couple more days too.
I know.
You can do 2 days.
Yeah.
It can feel like an eon when you're in the last week of something.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's fine. Great. Well, thank you again so much. We'll send any of that feedback we get over.
That'd be great.
That'd be great. Thank you.
We will see you all again soon.
Yeah, that's great. And we're looking to do more things like this too. So if there's,
if you hear of anybody who wants,
creativity and wellness. Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely be in touch, next year for helping us again. But if we hear anybody who's like interested in something like this, I'll definitely help you or touch base with you, connect you, as they say. I'm not in finals week and my head's all over the place. So, but yeah, definitely connect you with anybody who is looking for something like this in the future.
Cool.
Thanks.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Sure. Great to meet y'all.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.